So I received a diagnosis in late February of 2019 that I had a recurrence of triple negative breast cancer. This was about a month and a half before my first wedding anniversary, so it wasn't the best news ever. And a PET scan and MRI later confirmed that I had cancer that was in the pleural lining of my right lung, stomach nodes, the supraclavicular nodes on the right side, and then I had mets in the cerebellum and frontal lobe of my brain. I knew this wasn't good, but I also knew I was going to get through it. It didn't even faze me, actually. There was never a time that I thought I wasn't going to get through it. And I knew it was going to be a tougher journey than in 2011 when I first had breast cancer. I knew it was going to be a little longer of a process getting through this one because it was more unknown than the first time when I had a mastectomy, had 4 rounds of chemo, and then that was it. I moved on with my life. So I didn't want to just sit around and wait for chemotherapy to begin, and I didn't want to have to wait for the targeted brain radiation to begin. And so, having my mind go with all these different tangents and rabbit holes about what could happen. So I started looking for someplace where I could receive Reiki. I was always interested in Reiki as a healing art, and I always wanted to learn how to do it. And so I went online and I found actually a practicing physician in San Diego who was also a Reiki master. Now, I don't know if you understand how unusual this is because most doctors don't believe in the healing arts. I have been coming in contact a lot lately with doctors who are doing a lot of Eastern and Western medical practices in their practice. And Dr. Jim in Santa Monica, who I've been going to for 20 years, he's definitely an MD, but he also practices Eastern Western. And so I found Dr. Danilia Chev online, and I started getting Reiki through her, and it started opening up a lot of things in my body, emotionally, physically. It was really helping with my emotional state, and it was also bringing up things from my childhood and from my current professional and personal life that were bringing up issues to help me focus on and maybe work on healing as I was going through a physical healing with my body. And so I started chemotherapy at the end of March, and I had 1 brain radiation right before I started taking the chemotherapy treatments. And the targeted brain radiation actually wasn't so bad. They make a mask that eventually this mask is bolted down to the table when you receive the radiation. So it's not a comfortable experience, the actual process of it, but afterwards it was fine. I don't really remember having any ill side effects other than being pretty tired that day. And so I went through 4 rounds of Abraxane and Tecentriq, an immunotherapy drug, and then come July, not much had changed in the PET scan. And I had a little bit more in my brain that I had to have another radiation, targeted radiation in June. But July, we were trying to figure out what the next step was. And so during that time, I was just receiving immunotherapy because I didn't think the Abraxane was the right drug for me. I wasn't sure what was, but I had a gut feeling that wasn't it. And so during this time, we were trying to figure out what the next step was. The disease actually progressed, and I noticed 2 lumps on my neck that 1 lump on my neck and 1 lump on my shoulder blade that were new, and they were kind of hard. And one was shooting pain up my neck and down my arm, and the other one was just there. I didn't really have any feeling for it, but it was just kind of big and hard. And so the next PET scan really was not great. And there were more mets that were showing up in my brain. And the radiation oncologist told me that if this kept happening, then he was going to do whole brain radiation on me. And those were 2 words I just didn't really want to accept. Whole brain, definitely not for me. And they just kind of hung in the air, and I was not taking them in. I was pushing those words away. I just didn't want to do that. But I ended up having a bunch of consults with different doctors, and with 3 different doctors at prestigious organizations, at City of Hope, at UCSD, and at a doctor in the city of Orange. And they all came up with the same treatment because it was triple negative and I have a PALB2 mutation. They all said that GemCarb was the right treatment for me. So gemcitabine and carboplatinum, plus they added Avastin. My Kaiser oncologist added Avastin to help with the brain. And so I started this treatment and it was really harsh on my body. The gemcitabine was just really difficult. I had had a port put in last April in my arm, and then in July it had gotten inflamed and it developed a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis, and so I had the port taken out, and so all of these IV infusions I was now getting were through an IV. And so gemcitabine, the chemotherapy going through an IV into my vein, was actually quite painful. It was kind of like a burning sensation, and my skin would always have some kind of weird reaction to it afterwards. So it was very harsh, and because it was very harsh, it made me super nauseous, and so the nausea I was having a really hard time dealing with. And through one of my husband's friends, I was put in contact with a woman in Florida who is very knowledgeable about medical cannabis, and because I'm in California, she introduced me to Dr. Alan Frankel, who is an expert here in cannabis, and he's one of the leading experts who has been studying cannabis for at least 15 years. He's a medical doctor who has his own story, which is quite interesting. And so I had a consult with him, and he introduced me to a formula called the Quad formula, which has THC, THCA, CBD, and CBDA. And that helped tremendously with the nausea and the pain going through chemotherapy. And then my doctor in Santa Monica, Dr. Jim, handed me an article from Alternatives magazine written by Dr. David Williams. And this article was about a man named Joe Tippins, who, long story short, started taking a dog deworming medication called fenbendazole, which basically cured him of cancer. Now, I use the word cure because I don't like the word remission. Remission implies that it's going to come back. And if you have 0% circulating tumor cells and everything's coming up negative, no evidence of disease, then I consider that cured. That's my terminology and my thoughts. So you should definitely read the article. I'm not going to go into the details here, but I bought this dog deworming medication online called fenbendazole, and I got it off of chewy.com. And I immediately started taking it along with my chemotherapy treatment. I continued getting Reiki. I continued seeing my holistic doctor for acupuncture, and I also saw a doctor in San Diego for acupuncture. And slowly but surely, with the Reiki, the acupuncture, the chemotherapy treatments, the CBD tincture, and the fenbendazole, I started to feel my health kind of start to turn around. You know, the pain was leaving. I was having a little bit more energy. I wasn't getting as sick, so I could eat more food. I was putting more, so I could put more weight on. I had gotten pretty skinny. And then on one of Joe Tippin's podcasts, I heard him talk about care oncology, which was also brought up in the David Williams article. And so I had a consult with a triple negative expert at care oncology, Dr. Zhang. And in addition to the therapies I was already on, I took their 4-drug protocol, which they've had a lot of success with for triple negative patients. And the 4 drugs are mebendazole, which is a human form of fenbendazole. So I switched from the dog deworming to the human, I don't know if it's a deworming drug for humans, but it's basically the same drug, but it has had trials for humans. And then doxycycline, metformin, which I had read online that triple negative patients had benefited from being on metformin. And then the last one was atorvastatin. So I added that 4-drug protocol to my regimen, along with all the supplements that I've been taking throughout the year. And slowly but surely, I was feeling better and the disease was going away. And 5.5 weeks after taking fenbendazole and then switching to the care oncology protocol, my PET scan came back 99% clean. I had checked that 1% was just about whether or not, they couldn't tell whether or not it was scar tissue that was lighting up or if it was just a couple more cancer cells that were still hanging in there. And then I had a brain MRI not long after taking fenbendazole, and that came back with no evidence of disease whatsoever. I've had 2 brain MRIs now that have come back and with no disease of, whatsoever, no evidence of disease. And so, and my last PET scan came back 100% clean. And I knew the last MRI and PET scan were going to come back clean because I had the Guardant 360 test, which is a highly sophisticated blood test. All they need to do is draw blood for this test, which is so great. You're not getting the radiation from a PET scan, and you're not getting the gadolinium from an MRI. So it's much less toxic on your body. And what this test does is that it reads certain markers. And so the first time I had the G360 done, I had 4 different markers that they were watching, and they were at various percentages. This Guardant 360 I had done, every single percentage of the 4 markers went down to 0. There was 0% of circulating tumor cells in my body. So having done that test first, I knew the PET scan and MRI were just going to come back negative, and that's exactly what happened. So after a year of finding out, from finding out that I was diagnosed with recurrence of cancer, a year later, I'm showing no evidence of disease at all. And I think it's because of a lot of different things. If you look at the book Radical Remissions by Kelly Turner, she interviewed hundreds of patients who were told that they had very little time to live. And somehow they all turned it around. And she found 9 different things that were common in all of their stories. And of those 9 different things, I think all of them or most of them had been implemented into my life. I changed my diet. I got herbs and supplements. I had a positive attitude. I wrote a daily journal. I wrote down every day what I was grateful for. I had these Western medical treatments, but I also implemented some healing arts too. And I think the balance of all of that, the continual Reiki, the acupuncture, the fenbendazole, the care oncology, it all worked to help me get a clean bill of health. And I plan to stay this way. And the bottom line is that no one can tell you how long you're going to live. No one can. No one knows. That's up to you. That's up to the decisions that you make in your life. And the power of the mind is a really wonderful thing. I remember having this one moment where I thought to myself, I wasn't sure if I was really pretending I was going to make it, or if I actually really was going to make it, especially during that time after the disease had progressed. And I went to my closet and thought, wow, I should really start thinking about giving some of these pieces I love to some people who might appreciate them. And I walked up to my closet and I just had that gut feeling like, nope, this is not your time. Don't start giving your clothes and shoes away. And so I closed the closet door. And from that point on, I knew it was going to be a struggle, and I knew it was going to be harder, to get to that end zone, but I knew I was on my way there. I had turned that corner and I was on my way. And I think, everybody has their own story, and it's up to you to decide what that story is.